I am Elena Marrow, and I am 32 years old. For a long time, I was the kind of woman people looked past without realizing they were doing it. I wasn't loud or demanding. I didn't enter rooms expecting attention. I believed that if you worked hard, stayed loyal, and loved deeply, life would eventually reward you. I believed patience was strength and silence was maturity. That belief shaped my choices, my relationships, and nearly erased me before I understood what was happening. Before I continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this reach people who are quietly rebuilding after betrayal, disappointment, or being underestimated. Your support helps these stories travel to the people who need them most. I grew up in a modest neighborhood outside Ravenbrook, a modern city where ambition moved fast and kindness often lagged behind. My parents didn't have money or influence, but they gave me something far more valuable: discipline. I learned early how to make something out of very little. I learned responsibility before comfort. I learned to stand on my own feet, even when they were tired. When I met Marcus Hale, I thought I had finally found someone who saw me. He was calm, intelligent, and quietly ambitious. Not flashy, not arrogant. At least not then. He spoke about the future with confidence, and I admired that. I believed in him from the start. I believed in us. Marcus was building a career in corporate finance. The hours were long, the pressure constant. I worked full-time too, sometimes more than one job, just to keep our lives steady. When money was tight, I covered the gaps. When he was stressed, I listened. When he doubted himself, I reminded him why he started. I didn't see it as sacrifice. I saw it as partnership. At that time, I had dreams of my own. Quiet dreams, but real ones. I loved design, quality, craftsmanship. I had an eye for value, detail, and elegance. But love made me pause those dreams. I told myself there would be time later. That once Marcus was stable, we would build together. I didn't realize I was slowly building him while putting myself on hold. At first, Marcus said he admired my background. He called me grounded. Real. He liked that I wasn't flashy or entitled. But admiration can turn into discomfort when someone starts chasing a different version of themselves. As his career progressed, his environment changed. His colleagues came from wealthy families. Their conversations were filled with inherited properties, elite schools, and connections passed down effortlessly. I didn't belong in those conversations, and Marcus knew it. I noticed the shift slowly. The way he corrected me in front of others. The way he stayed quiet when jokes were made about humble beginnings. The way he stopped introducing me proudly and started doing it quickly, as if my presence needed to be minimized. His family made it worse. They were polite but distant. Their questions felt less like curiosity and more like evaluation. What do your parents do? Where did you go to school? And what exactly are your plans for the future? Marcus never defended me. He smiled, nodded, and let the silence answer for him. Each silence felt louder than words. At home, things changed too. He became less present. He stayed out later. His phone was always face down. Conversations felt forced, like obligations instead of connection. When I asked if something was wrong, he told me I was imagining things. He said I was insecure. He said stress was getting to him. I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I didn't have to face the truth. I adjusted myself to fit his world. I spoke less about my goals. I laughed more quietly. I chose simpler clothes. I learned when to stay silent. I told myself this was love. I didn't realize I was shrinking until I barely recognized myself. The truth didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments. A missed call here. A vague explanation there. A growing distance I couldn't ignore anymore. Then one evening, everything cracked. Marcus had asked me not to attend a professional gathering he was hosting. He said it was strictly work. I respected that. But days later, I ran into a woman I barely knew. She smiled politely and asked how long Marcus and Vivian Cross had been together. I laughed at first, thinking she was confused. She wasn't. Vivian Cross was everything I wasn't. Polished. Confident. Born into wealth and certainty. Her family name carried influence. Doors opened for her without effort. She fit perfectly into the world Marcus wanted so badly to belong to. When I confronted Marcus, he didn't panic. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than any lie could have. He sat there quietly, almost relieved. He said it just happened. He said Vivian understood his goals. That she fit naturally into the future he was building. What shattered me wasn't just the cheating. It was realizing he had already rewritten his life without me. He had slowly pulled away, making space for someone else while I was still standing beside him, believing we were solid. He ended things calmly, without emotion. No apology. No guilt. Then he said the sentence that stayed with me the longest. You don't fit the life I see for myself. Not I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. Just that. I packed my things quietly. 2 suitcases. Years of loyalty reduced to what I could carry. He checked his phone while I folded my clothes. The apartment that once felt like home felt cold and unfamiliar. Walking out that door didn't feel dramatic. It felt empty. The humiliation followed me everywhere. People knew, not because I spoke, but because whispers traveled faster than truth. I felt eyes on me. Judgment without context. I stopped answering calls. I avoided familiar places. Nights were the worst. My chest hurt constantly. My thoughts wouldn't slow down. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was lost. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The silence there felt heavy, almost loud. Some mornings, getting out of bed felt like a victory. Money was tight. I counted every expense. Pride became something I couldn't afford. I cried when no one could hear me. I let myself feel the pain, but I refused to beg or chase. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't explain my side. Survival came first. In that quiet struggle, something unexpected happened. I started remembering who I was before I tried to fit into someone else's life. I remembered my eye for quality, my understanding of design, fabrics, and value. I remembered how much I loved learning. Marcus used to call it a hobby. I decided to treat it like a skill. I studied late into the night. I reached out to old contacts. I offered discreet consulting work, helping private clients make informed choices about luxury purchases and investments. The work was slow at first. Some weeks, nothing came through. Doubt followed me constantly. But I didn't quit. Every rejection taught me something. Every small success rebuilt my confidence quietly. I celebrated alone. I failed privately. I learned discipline in ways comfort never teaches. I wasn't rebuilding to prove anything to Marcus. I was rebuilding because I needed to remember my own strength. And in that quiet rebuilding, without drama or announcements, I found something I thought I had lost forever. Myself. That was when Adrien Locke entered my life. Not with fireworks. Not with promises. Just calm presence and respect. And without realizing it, I had stepped onto a path that would change everything. Meeting Adrien Locke didn't feel like fate announcing itself. There were no dramatic moments or instant sparks. It felt quiet, almost ordinary, and maybe that was why it mattered so much. Our first meetings were strictly professional. He had been referred to me through a private network I had slowly built during my consulting work. Adrien needed discreet advice on a series of acquisitions involving rare assets and luxury holdings. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and never interrupted me. What stood out immediately was how present he was. When I spoke, he didn't glance at his phone or rush the conversation. He paid attention, not just to my words, but to the reasoning behind them. That alone felt unfamiliar. I had grown used to explaining myself twice, to softening my confidence so it wouldn't threaten anyone. With Adrien, I didn't need to do that. He trusted my judgment from the start. Not blindly, but respectfully. When he disagreed, he said so calmly, without trying to overpower the conversation. Disagreement felt safe around him. It felt like collaboration, not competition. Over time, our meetings became more frequent. Always professional. Always respectful. Slowly, conversations stretched beyond work. We talked about values, discipline, patience, and the cost of building something meaningful. Adrien never spoke about success as if it defined him. If anything, he downplayed his achievements. I later learned that was intentional. He valued privacy more than recognition. I noticed what he didn't ask. He never questioned my background. He never asked where I came from. He never tried to place me into a category. He treated me as an equal before he knew anything else about me. Trust didn't come easily for me after Marcus. I kept emotional distance. I had learned how painful it was to give too much too soon. Adrien never pushed. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. When I hesitated, he respected it without making me feel guilty. Consistency became his language. He showed up when he said he would. His words matched his actions. If he couldn't make something work, he explained why. That reliability rebuilt something inside me slowly. I didn't even notice it happening at first. As my work expanded, so did my confidence. My consulting practice grew from small private advice into something more structured. I began working with clients across North Shore City, advising on high-value purchases, estate selections, and private investments. The income stabilized. The fear eased. For the first time in a long while, I felt grounded. Adrien supported that growth without trying to own it. He encouraged me to keep building independently. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my ability, not my circumstances. When I succeeded, he celebrated without making it about himself. If I failed, he didn't rush to fix it. He trusted me to handle my challenges. That trust changed me. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I spoke with certainty again. I made decisions without fear of being judged. Somewhere along the way, our professional connection became something deeper. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Just naturally. We began spending time together outside of work. Simple things. Dinners without distractions. Walks without urgency. Conversations that didn't feel like performances. For the first time, I wasn't trying to become someone else to be loved. I was enough as I was. When Adrien eventually told me about the full scope of his success, it wasn't through announcements or displays. It came through observation. The way people treated him with quiet respect. The careful decisions he made without hesitation. The influence he carried without needing to assert it. Adrien wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in a quiet, disciplined way. His net worth was estimated in the high nine figures, built through strategic investments, technology holdings, and private ventures across Europe and North America. Yet he lived simply. He dressed without excess. He avoided public attention. And nothing about our relationship changed when I learned the truth. He didn't use his success to control me. He didn't make me feel like I owed him anything. He never compared me to anyone from his past. Instead, he valued my independence. He respected my boundaries. He treated me like a partner, not a project. When we decided to get married, it was quiet and intentional. No spectacle. No expectations. Just a commitment made for the right reasons. We married privately in Lakeshore Vale, surrounded by nature and a small circle of people who genuinely mattered. Life after marriage didn't feel like a transformation. It felt like alignment. I continued building my career. Adrien continued building his. We supported each other without merging identities. Love didn't feel like a sacrifice anymore. It felt steady, safe. Then, one ordinary afternoon, the past knocked on my door. The invitation arrived mixed in with bills and routine mail. Cream paper. Heavy lettering. My hands froze before I even read the name. Some names don't need introductions to bring back memories. Marcus Hale. Seeing his name felt like stepping on broken glass barefoot. I hadn't heard from him in years. Not since the night he walked away and left me feeling replaceable. I stood there staring at the envelope, my heart pounding, memories flooding back without permission. I didn't open it immediately. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Not because I missed Marcus, but because the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. When I finally opened the invitation the next morning, the words felt distant, almost unreal. Marcus was getting married. To Vivian Cross. And he wanted me there. I didn't know why. Guilt. Curiosity. Pride. Maybe he wanted to prove something. Or maybe he simply wanted to see who I had become. Whatever the reason, the invitation felt like an echo from a life I no longer lived. When I told Adrien, he didn't react with jealousy or discomfort. He listened calmly and asked how I felt. He made it clear the decision was mine alone. Whatever I chose, he would support it. That freedom mattered. I thought about it deeply. I wasn't afraid of seeing Marcus. I was afraid of reopening wounds I had worked so hard to heal. I asked myself why I would go. It wasn't to prove anything. It wasn't for revenge. I wanted closure. I wanted to stand in the same space where I once felt small and feel nothing. Once I made the decision to attend, I approached it thoughtfully. I chose a gown that reflected who I had become. Elegant, confident, timeless. The piece was custom-made by a private European designer, valued at just under $2.4 million, crafted with precision and restraint. It wasn't loud. It didn't beg for attention. It spoke quietly of growth, discipline, and self-respect. Preparing for the event felt different than I expected. I wasn't nervous. I was steady. I didn't rehearse conversations or imagine reactions. I trusted myself to handle whatever came. Adrien stood beside me, not as protection, but as partnership. He treated the moment as something I needed to experience on my own terms. As the day approached, I realized something important. I wasn't walking into that wedding as the woman Marcus left behind. I was walking in as someone who had already moved forward. And the past no longer had power over me. The venue was already alive with quiet excitement when Adrien and I arrived. The wedding was held at Silvermont Hall, an expansive modern estate just outside North Shore City, known for hosting high-profile private events. Soft instrumental music drifted through the open space, blending with low conversations and polite laughter. Everything was elegant, controlled, and carefully curated. As soon as we stepped inside, I felt it. The subtle pause. The shift in energy. The way conversations slowed before people realized they had. I wasn't trying to be noticed, but attention has a way of finding you when confidence walks calmly into a room. Adrien stood beside me, composed and relaxed, dressed simply, without display. Those who recognized him did not speak loudly. They didn't need to. Respect traveled through the room quietly, carried by glances and subtle changes in posture. My gown moved effortlessly with each step. The craftsmanship was understated but undeniable. Hand-finished silk, sculpted lines, and a design that spoke of restraint rather than excess. It wasn't meant to compete with the bride. It wasn't meant to announce anything. It reflected who I had become, someone who no longer needed to be loud to be seen. People whispered softly as we passed. Not curiosity. Recognition. I felt calm, grounded. There was no racing heartbeat, no tightening chest. The woman who once feared this moment no longer existed. Then I saw Marcus. He stood near the center of the room, speaking with a group of guests, his posture confident, his smile practiced. When his eyes landed on me, the expression on his face shifted before he could control it. Confusion came first, then disbelief, then something heavier, something that looked very much like regret. His gaze moved from me to Adrien and lingered there longer than necessary. He was trying to understand, trying to reconcile the past with the present. Vivian stood beside him, radiant and flawless in her wedding attire. She noticed the change in his focus almost immediately. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes followed his. When she saw me, something subtle shifted in her expression. Not anger, not jealousy, awareness. She sensed what was happening before she fully understood it. Adrien greeted a few people politely as we moved through the room. He didn't introduce himself loudly. He didn't explain who he was. Others did that for him in careful tones and respectful nods. I could feel the atmosphere changing, not dramatically, not publicly, but undeniably. Marcus watched from across the room, his composure slowly unraveling. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking under his gaze. I stood exactly where I belonged. Eventually, the moment came. Marcus found an opening when Adrien stepped aside to greet someone nearby. I noticed Marcus approaching before he spoke. His steps were slower than I remembered. Less certain. When he stopped in front of me, he hesitated, like someone unsure whether they were allowed to speak. "Elena," he said quietly. I met his eyes and nodded politely. No warmth. No hostility. Just courtesy. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. He asked how I had been. I answered simply. I asked the same. Our words were careful, measured, like walking on thin ice. He glanced toward Adrien more than once, clearly struggling to connect the man beside me with the version of life he thought he understood. "You look well," Marcus said finally. "I am," I replied. There was a pause. Then he spoke again, choosing his words too carefully. I didn't expect this. I understood what he meant. He hadn't expected me to be standing there, calm, confident, untouched by the moment he once believed would define me. He spoke about timing, about life taking strange turns, about choices that make sense only later. He avoided responsibility without denying it outright. I listened without interrupting. I didn't correct him. I didn't remind him of the nights I cried, the years I supported him, or the way he erased me. I didn't need to. The realization was already settling in on his face. He was seeing what he lost, not in wealth or status, but in loyalty, patience, and unconditional support. The things he traded away for appearance and convenience. Those things were standing right in front of him, and he knew they couldn't be replaced. "I'm glad you came," he said finally, his voice tight. "I wish you well," I replied calmly. Nothing more. There was no satisfaction in hurting him. His regret spoke louder than anything I could say. From a distance, Vivian watched us. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes followed every movement. She understood the comparison she never asked for and couldn't escape. She had the wedding. She had the future Marcus chose. But she also saw something she couldn't claim, peace. Marcus stepped back, nodding once, as if accepting something he had just understood too late. I returned to Adrien's side without looking back. As the evening continued, I felt lighter with each passing moment. The tension that once lived in my chest was gone. I didn't need to stay long. I didn't need to be seen any longer. When Adrien took my hand, it felt natural. Steady. Equal. We walked toward the exit together, unnoticed by most, but watched by the few who understood what had just happened. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. I took a deep breath and felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known I was still seeking. I glanced back once and saw Marcus standing rigid near the entrance, watching us leave. I didn't need to interpret his expression. I already knew. He gained the life he thought he wanted, but lost something far greater. Vivian stood beside him, flawless and composed, yet her eyes followed us with a quiet understanding. She had won a wedding. I had won myself. As Adrien and I walked away, I realized something important. Revenge was never about gowns or appearances. It was never about being seen or admired. True revenge, the kind that lasts, was the life I built quietly when no one was watching. It was the confidence I reclaimed, the independence I protected, and the love I accepted without conditions. Adrien didn't stand beside me as someone who saved me. He stood beside me as an equal. And that made all the difference. For the first time, I felt whole. Not because someone chose me, but because I chose myself. The betrayal that once defined me no longer had power. My life, my choices, my future, they belonged entirely to me. And as we disappeared into the quiet night, I knew I had won something no one could ever take away. Before you leave, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that rebuilding in silence is still winning.